Good morning. We're with Old Town Cleveland today. I'm sitting in for Ron. I'm going to try to do my best to
Tell them who you are.
Tommy. I'm Tommy Loftus. I do the Thursday night Good Sports show. But I'm going to try to sit in with
Bless his heart. We're both sitting here laughing at him.
Yeah, well, that's all right.
Thank you, Tommy, for being our DJ today. And come to find out, Tommy happens to know quite a bit about our subject today, so he's going to be jumping in and probably asking a lot of questions, which is perfectly okay with us.
Good.
The other graveyard diva is in here with me this morning. We have Laura Bryan Spann with us. She comes into town every so often and visits her mom, and I usually pencil her in. And today's a great day to be listening. We're going to be talking a lot about Calhoun and about getting some military markers that she's gotten recently. And we have a story about a woman in a trunk and an abandoned church. And
you just never know how sidetracked we'll get.
So just hang on, because we can talk for nonstop for 8 hours. I am Debbie Moore, and we have Tommy Loftus running our control board for us here this morning, and Laura's here to help me talk about dead people, and Ron is over in Franklin, and I understand all the local teams have done quite well, but at this point in time, it looks like Bradley's going to bring home the team trophy. We have 5 guys, I think, that are wrestling for the championship, and 3 kids in consolations today, and other kids that are wrestling for 3rd and 4th place. So congratulations to all the local teams. I know that Walker Valley, Cleveland, and Bradley are all well represented by the coaches and the kids.
And from a basketball standpoint, on the same subject, the Bears play today at, I think, 4:30 over in McMinn in the district tournament. They're playing McMinn County High School, followed by Cleveland and Walker Valley the game after that. So if you're not doing anything and you want to see some good basketball, that would be a great thing to do. Ride up to McMinn County, spend about $6 or $7, and get in, grab you a box of popcorn, and go watch some basketball.
There you go. I know I can't talk this morning. I think you guys probably noticed that wonderful aroma coming from the Bald-Headed Bistro when you came in. Somebody's hickory smoking something. It smelled incredible when we came in this morning. Okay, folks. Well, we're going to get started here with Laura. And Laura, I know that Laura and I were talking before we went on the air that we really weren't interested in the Civil War.
Right.
Not the least. I mean, I wasn't. I just wasn't a person that would sit and read about battles and things. But when you get down on the home front, which is where my book Confederate Voices came from, and you start talking about the lives of the people before, during, and after the war, and what happened in this area that's very unique to most places, because we had so many groups of people here for such an extended period of time from both sides. Both sides did some damage here.
Right.
Both sides, there were lots of folks that saw this beautiful countryside and came back here after the Civil War. So those are the kinds of things that I'm interested in. How did you become interested? Who's this marker for, and how did you find him? Because he was dead in the ground with no marker.
That's right. And actually, there are a couple of them that we found now. Just as a little background information, I and we were talking about that, I'm not a historian by any means. Really am a researcher and more interested in the genealogy that's involved in the people that are there, the people that we're finding the markers for, and their families. The Shiloh Presbyterian Cemetery is in Calhoun. Joseph McMinn, the 3-term governor of Tennessee, is buried there, and it's there as you go out 163 right past the underpass beside the Meadowlands Park.
Okay. Tommy, did you know that the governor's buried there?
I did not.
Did you know there used to be a church there?
I did not know that either.
Hey.
I said, that's right. And I said, it sounds like we're wandering, but you almost need to know the background information to be able to piece the story together. Yes, there was a Shiloh Presbyterian Church there that was built in 1824. Governor McMinn helped fund that, and he had been a Quaker, and he had joined the Presbyterian Church, and he wanted to build a meeting house there, and so it was built in 1824 and was used for school and for church. And in 1863, when the Union Army came in and occupied Calhoun, they tore down the church and used that lumber to build a pontoon bridge and 2 ferries across the Hiwassee River. The railroad bridge across the river had been damaged and burned by both sides, the Union and the Confederate sides, and they needed to be able to maintain that passageway across the river. So it's kind of like a backup plan for them to have that available. So
Yeah.
during March of 1864, they built that
Tommy,
bridge.
President Lincoln said to take and hold the railroad at Cleveland in East Tennessee was more important than taking Richmond. And he was talking about the bridge over the Hiwassee River, because you could cut off the supplies to a great large area if you stopped the train right there.
Wow.
So,
And so we have researched that. Later on, the organizations that were damaged by the Union Army could apply for reimbursement, individuals and organizations. And so the trustees of that church did apply for reimbursement from the government. And so therefore, those records are at the National Archives. And when we ordered those about maybe a year ago, in there were depositions from the citizens of Calhoun describing that event and how the church was taken down, the lumber was passed in front of their home, and how it affected them. And of course, there was no longer a Presbyterian church that was there. But we were able to almost reconstruct a visual image of the church, because one of the depositions was taken by Debbie's best friend, Return Jonathan Meggs Only, who is a character unto himself.
he's the Forrest Gump of war. He wrote, you were supposed to put 4 pages for your pension application. His was 63, because he was sure that, and it's just like when you read it, I laughed the whole time, because it's just like he thought the whole thing was happening because of him.
Mm-hmm.
But he did take a great length of time to describe things and how the bridge looked and how ice was on it, and so he's the one that described the church.
Right. And the building materials and the height. And he described himself. He was a
builder.
minister. He was a builder. He was an architect.
A
he
painter,
was a painter.
a lawyer.
Right. And so we are, I said not to get too sidetracked, but
No.
we are in the process and have hopefully this week completed our application for a Civil Wars trail marker that will be there at the Meadowlands Park. And it will describe this event and have that image that we've reconstructed on the marker. All of that to say that in researching that, then I became interested in that cemetery itself and who was buried there, because the descendants of the people that are the ancestors live in Calhoun are buried in the Methodist Baptist Saul Paul Cemetery that's up on Church Street. That Presbyterian cemetery is inactive, and but I was curious about who those people were. And when you start researching those individually, the first person that I came across related to being a veteran was William P. Worley. His wife is there. He had children that were there and nephews and nieces that were buried there. And I own, I sound like a commercial for Ancestry.com, but that is, I do most of the research online, and found his discharge record from the Soldiers' Home in Johnson City. And it explained that he was buried in that Calhoun Cemetery. And I found enough information to realize that he really was buried there beside his wife. And
Does she have a marker?
she does have a marker, a beautiful
I have
iron marker.
short-term memory loss. What is his name?
His name is William P. Worley.
Worley.
Right. And so when I started trying to decide if I could find, if we could order a marker, we got into the qualifications for actually ordering one.
Mm-hmm.
The Veterans Administration will supply military markers for any veteran as far back as you can find a next of kin. Now, in the past, the markers could be ordered by social organizations, historical societies, and in 2009 they changed that rule, and you
That
had to
makes it
have
so
a
much
next of
harder.
kin. It is harder, and especially when you're talking about, Civil War era or before that. But I did track down through the census reports. I've tracked his family down to Chattanooga.
Stalker.
His son's names were on that discharge record. And I found his son's names and found in Chattanooga. And I just went on good old Google and did an obituary search on the last relative I could find, and up popped the obituary for him. And I found his great-great-granddaughter who lives in Johnson City, and contacted her and told her that was the strangest phone call she was ever going to receive, and that I was not a stalker.
Yeah.
And so got with her. She knew that he was buried there. He had two. She also had two aunts, her dad's little baby sisters, that were buried there. And so we completed the application process for that. You have to prove their military service, and you have to prove that the grave is not marked. And because she was the next of kin, she could sign the application. And we received that marker, and we installed it, and then had a dedication service for that in
A
November.
very
And
nice
you were
one.
there, right?
And it was wonderful that they brought all the small children in the family too, and they came up and laid flowers on the graves and all that. And so I'm sure that's something that the children didn't really understand at the moment, but later on they're going to think that was really neat.
Right. And she had pictures of our
Of
veteran
him.
of Worley, his wife, and so they were both buried there, and of those two little girls, the ones that we marked their graves also. Yes, and so therefore you see that the primary interest was not really in his military service. That wasn't the focus, even though we did have some Civil War reenactors there for the children, really. But it is the genealogy and the history, and being sure that those graves are marked. And that family was very appreciative.
They
of
certainly
that.
were, and I was thrilled when I got there and the picture was there, because I
Right.
love those old pictures where the people look so serious and everything.
Right.
And so, do you know where they lived?
Where the Worleys lived. They lived right down in town. He was a cabinet maker. And in fact, the great-great-granddaughter that I met and became friends with had a table that he had built. She still has it in her home. And her family had done quite a bit of research on them. And so we were glad to be able to help order the marker and have it there and have the dedication service. We did that, as for one of our historical society meetings that day, and I think we had about 40 people there at the dedication service. And so then, in the meantime,
Meanwhile, back at the cemetery.
That's right. It continued. Yes, that cemetery is a story also unto itself about finding other markers.
And where
that were
are you
buried.
on writing that book about Calhoun?
Shh. My cousin Joe Bryan has continued to encourage me with that. I also had found reference both on Ancestry and in some other records to another unmarked grave that was there in the cemetery. It's interesting that the wives of both of these, the wife had passed away first, had a nice, beautiful marker. The second one, Mr. John D. Lyle, his wife is buried there and has a beautiful tall marble marker. And so I found there's obviously a grave there beside him. And so I did the research on him, and he was a Confederate veteran. Mr. Worley
Lyle
was
was.
Mr. Worley was a Union veteran, and Mr. Lyle was a Confederate veteran. And
This young man is Morgan, and he's
Hello,
an
Morgan.
intern here
Hi,
with
Nice
us.
to meet you. I'm Laura.
And- Yes, go ahead. Wait, push on. There you go. Okay, he's plugged in now.
Okay.
But
Volume.
and Morgan, this is Tommy. He's running the board for us
Yeah, we
today.
met a couple weeks ago.
Met him with Doc Hollywood.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was an experience for you, Morgan.
Sure.
Maybe an experience for Tommy.
Always is.
But so now, so where are you in the process with Mr. Lyle? Have you
Well,
found
we kind of did the same thing. I found his great-great-grandson online and sent a message to him and told him that I thought that his, this relative was buried there, and he said that he was. And the interesting part of this story is that Mr. Lyle, who was a very active citizen in Calhoun. He was the chairman of the board of trustees of the Calhoun Masonic Institute. He was a notary public. He had asked that his grave not be marked. And so his wife is buried there with this beautiful marble marker, and he had told his family he did not want his grave marked.
I wonder
So,
why.
I don't know.
No.
I think maybe just as an humble person, you know. I know it. And
I
so,
don't want him to come back and haunt you,
so
Lord.
there,
Mark his grave.
I know it. And so sometimes I'm wondering if I'm stirring up trouble. And so I contacted
Oh,
the family.
maybe that's it. He was
to-
just kind of humble, and he didn't want them.
I think.
They may have overreacted. He didn't mean a big marker. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That would identify everything he did,
Right.
and they just didn't mark it
right,
off.
and just not,
Or
spend the money
sometimes
on
they
it.
are marked and they just get lost.
Right.
They break and they fall over and
Right, which is what we ran into up in the other cemetery for the 1812 markers. But I contacted the family, told them I understood that I had seen a post that they had posted that said he didn't want it marked. The family had a meeting and decided that they did want it marked. They thought it had been long enough, since it's over 100 years, that it was long enough that they wanted it marked for
future
history.
Yeah.
Right. And so I did the same thing, helped fill out the application, found enough information, death certificate, those kinds of information, and also his military record. There's a website called Fold 3, which is a subscription service, and so found his military record and submitted that application to his family who lives in Knoxville, and we sent it on to the VA, and it was approved, and that marker has been received, and it is pending installation. It is in Madisonville at White's Monument Company, and so it was a success. Also, not thinking about the military service necessarily, but as a marker, the VA supplies those markers free of charge, and then you pay to have them installed. And so that, therefore, then we ended up with one that was Union and one was a Confederate.
And we think there's by the time you do all that, there's probably $150 or more involved. And if anyone wanted to donate to that cause, they could just stop up at the Heritage Center in Charleston, I would think,
Right.
and just
To help defray the cost of having
yes.
it installed. The families end up, being responsible for that installation fee, and before I order them, I have them understand that
that's a small price to pay.
Right.
Yeah.
And
And
so-
it will be a marker that has the Iron Cross on it from the Confederacy,
Right.
and it'll have his date of birth, his date of death, of course, his name, and then it will say what company he served with. Was he with the 43rd Tennessee, the 5th
No,
Tennessee?
he wasn't.
In the group out of Athens, then I would think.
When let's see, this is
Oh, it doesn't. It
no,
doesn't.
that's well. I'll
but
have to go.
it's-
I said I've looked at so many of them now. I have to go back and look to see. But he, just in acknowledging the military service of the citizens in Calhoun, this whole area, we've talked about this before, was really split in their loyalties. And in Calhoun in particular, in town, the primary vote was to secede. In McMinn County, it was very divided. And it's also been interesting to go back and see which side of the service these people fought for. But then they came back into Calhoun, became friends. Some were
It's amazing.
guardians for others' children. It is interesting. And we have one really great picture that was made about 1920 of 8 veterans from the Civil War, that about half are Confederate and half are Union. Of course, they're very old men by that point.
Well, our good friend Jonathan Returns Megs Only says in his pension application that the people in Calhoun decided to go with the Union, and so the Union flag was raised. But then he went out on his own and recruited enough Confederate soldiers that that flag was lowered. and it was safely tucked inside a cigar box until the end of the war.
A cigar box.
Yeah, a cigar box.
Talk about weird places to stuff a flag.
Yeah, but it was in somebody's store up on top shelf. You know, he goes through this big explanation. Of course, it makes it sound like he recruited all the Confederates from that area. I love him.
Right.
He is quite the character. Quite the character. So where are we on Jonathan's, Mr. Only's
Well,
marker?
and so therefore, I hadn't even thought about that. I went up to the
Until
Calhoun
I went up and was,
There-
we were up at Shiloh, and I said, I'm up there wandering around in Shiloh Cemetery going, well, surely Mr. Only has a marker here. And Laura says, no, Debbie, he's down across the road in the other one.
right.
And so here I am, and I wandered all over the cemetery, and he didn't have a marker.
And so therefore, his grave is also unmarked. We know that he is buried in the Calhoun Cemetery. The other cemetery in Calhoun is up beside the Baptist Church, and where the Methodist Church used to be.
It's
There's
really big.
a gazebo that's there now, and it's up on Church Street, kind of
Now,
behind
was-
City Hall.
Okay, where the gazebo is was a Methodist church.
Right.
The big church that's there now is a,
The Baptist,
Baptist Church.
Church.
First
and-
Baptist.
wasn't there another church across the street?
There was the Christian church was right across the street. Where
Is that
there
Church
now
Street?
A house. That's right. It is called. Hey, good to think it. Yes, it is
Wow.
called Church Street.
Well,
And so there was a Christian church that was there across the street. There's a home there now, and that church was converted into a residence, and then was later another house was built there, and that church was torn down. And if anybody's driven up by there, you know where that beautiful Saul Paul angel marker is. That's
Mhm.
there in the Saul
that I
Paul
always
section of
thought
the
was
marker.
marble, but it's not.
No, it isn't marble.
You know which one we're talking about? The big angel that's up in the. Tommy needs to go on a field trip with us.
I do because it's been a while since I've been in Calhoun.
Great big angel one, and I always thought it was a big marble monument. But what is it? Pot metal or
Right.
some kind of metal?
Right. It is.
Tommy's.
And it's where?
It's behind that big church in Calhoun.
Behind.
Yeah, and
Calhoun
it's the
First.
biggest monument in the cemetery.
Okay.
And it's Saul Paul
Right.
on it.
The Saul Pauls. The reason that we know that Return Jonathan Meggs Only is buried there was because he's listed on the WPA record in that cemetery, and so
Is that proof enough? Other than his wife, does she have a marker?
she does not have a marker.
Mm-hmm.
There is a I went up there yesterday thinking about you and about him. Debbie's the one that brought that up about that we really needed to try to order a marker for him. And there is a small marker that is there that's broken off in the section that it almost has to be in if you look at the sequence of the
Now she was a Swisher,
right.
and the Swishers are buried there.
mhm,
Reverend
right,
Swisher.
he swish,
Swish.
And it's SWISHER.
right,
Swish.
right.
So it's like almost like one letter away from Swifter.
Yeah, I was, yeah, like a Swifter. But they have a nice monument.
Yes, he does.
He does.
Yes, and yes, he was the Methodist minister, and so it even says has that on there. And I think maybe it has his last words. I will have to go back up and look.
Mhm.
And so anyway, we know that he is there. Now the challenge would be to try to find a next of kin for Return Jonathan Meggs Only, who had no children.
That's difficult.
That's right. And he had a brother named Edward, and I've started down that line to try to see if we could find a.
But now you
the
remember,
next of kin.
you remember some Onlys that lived in Calhoun.
Well, there were some later, and then they married into. They married into the Womack family, and so I had to kind of stop that to work on my other project. But
Mhm.
we will get back with that one because I do think because of his history in Calhoun, it would be nice to have a.
Well, I need to
marker
give
for
his
him also.
eulogy when we do his marking.
I think so too.
He's been quite a character. The Great Wall of Chattata. Supposedly, there's a wall out in on the Hooper farm that had hieroglyphics on it and all this kind of stuff. Well, he actually drew the diagrams of what he saw in that site, and it's actually printed in a book. And someone sent me. It's a Xerox copies. They scanned a Xerox copy and sent me the pictures. But it's the same pictures that there's some kind of small poster about the history of that area, and those drawings are on there. So I knew I had seen them somewhere before. But he's such a character because he filled out applications for the people to try to get what I call Indian money. You know, you were trying to prove that you were related to the Cherokees when they started giving away land in the early 1900s out west to those people who could prove that they were Cherokee. He painted houses, he says he built the Cumberland Presbyterian Church that's still standing in Charleston, but I've never seen that proved anywhere. But he says that he was the designer and builder of the Presbyterian Church in Charleston. And I don't know. What else did he do? He was an author. He rewrote Dixie. He thought Dixie needed to be rewritten. He rewrote Dixie. I mean, he is such a hoot.
Yeah. Wouldn't you love to have
And
met
he was
him?
the only person that knew where McMinn was buried.
That's right.
And they were getting ready to bury him in Athens because they thought that he needed to be buried in a bigger city.
Yeah, they were going to move him.
Oh,
They
that's
were
it.
going to exhume his body and move him to Athens because they thought he
okay.
shouldn't stay there in lowly Calhoun.
But Mr. Only wouldn't tell them where he was buried, so they couldn't move him.
Right.
That's the story.
That's right. And so, yes, and you know, in addition to that story, then, you know, he is also one of the ones that knew that when, see, the church was built in 1823 or 4. Joseph McMinn was the Indian agent
Yes.
across the river in Charleston, what is now Charleston. And he died in 1824, right after the church was built. And he requested to his friend, Mr. A.R. Turk, that his feet be planted toward the north door of the church. So on Resurrection Day, he could be the first one to walk into the church. And so his body supposedly is buried in a north-south direction. Normally graves are east and west. And so he supposedly is there. We had, we'll switch into grave dousing.
Just hold on, folks. Here we go.
No, I said,
Tommy, if you'll be sure that when we get finished with this story, be sure the phones are on.
Okay.
Okay.
we were talking about that, and about that makes you think about where the church was in the cemetery itself.
Right.
And we
didn't know, Tommy, where the church was actually located.
in there, but I mapped out the
But
graves.
she figured it out.
Well, you have to map out the graves because you have to know where those gravestones, the dates of the burials in it, so therefore you could eliminate where you knew it couldn't have been. It couldn't be where there were graves that were before the church was built. And so
What's the oldest grave in that cemetery?
well, it looks like the marker is probably 1840 because it's that old Barnell. It's kind of, really fallen apart, but it's very similar to some that are in the Calhoun Cemetery that we can still read. But we did that, and then we had, you may or may not believe in dousing for graves or water lines or any of those things. Should we explain?
All right. Yes, explain.
Do you wanna
Morgan, this is
explain?
an old-fashioned way of doing things. My grandpa used to go out, and I want to say it was a peach tree branch, and he would get one where it forked, and it would be like this, and then it would be a straight stick on that side, and he could walk around and tell you where water could be found in the ground by how it would vibrate, because it's the difference in how the soil either has been moved, which is what happens in the cemetery,
Right.
and a good dowser will tell you, they can tell you if it's a male or a female by how the stick reacts. Now we use little metal rods.
Right.
I have a pair of those. I look like I'm trying to find aliens or something when I'm out in the yard with these little metal sticks.
And it's
Look out for the
it
crop
is-
circles.
Perhaps
right. It really is interesting. If you read about it, there's a real debate about whether that works or not.
Now, how did that help you in the cemetery?
Well, because Barry Phillips is a gentleman from Cleveland, and he, I could blame all of this on him because this all started back in the other cemetery. But he, when we had the Patriot dedication service for Joseph McMinn's marker, it wasn't actually even marked. He was a Revolutionary War soldier. Joseph McMinn was.
He just had a big monument for like being a governor, I
Right,
guess.
right. And so the SAR came and had a dedication service last summer, and Barry was there. And while he was there, he took his dowsing rods, and he could determine or estimated where the foundation of the church would have been for the same reason, because the soil had been disturbed. And he could go on. We knew that the church was about 30 by 40 feet. And so he went down on the south end of the cemetery about where we thought it would have been and kind of marked off where we think the church actually stood. And so that's an interesting concept that, you know, the whole thing. He's one of the ones that could determine.
So
whether
he
it's male
gave
or
you the
female.
skeleton. He said,
Right.
okay, I think it's in this
Right.
spot. We knew where McMinn was buried, so that matched.
Right.
And then the graves that had been dug later than when the church was removed are in the space where the church was.
That's right.
So you had 3 or 4 factors that had to
Right.
all go together, so now we know where the church
Right,
was.
right.
Is someone going to make an artist rendition of the church?
Yes, Joe has done that. We found
Oh.
and it'll be on this marker, the Civil War
right.
marker. When we knew from the description from R.J. Meggs only gave a specific description of the building materials, you know, the size of the church and everything. And so based on that and what a Quaker meeting house would have looked like, we found some pictures, some illustrations, and then Joe did a pen and ink drawing of that, partly from the computer. It was amazing. And so that picture will be on the marker when we're hoping that marker that's the way we just now have submitted that.
How much are those markers? You pay a portion of
yes,
it.
you
That's-
pay $1,100, and then you have to pay, I think it's a
$200
$200
a year.
year annual maintenance
So if
fee.
a tree falls on it, if somebody vandalizes it, if the ground opens up and swallows it, they will
Right.
replace it.
Right.
And once it becomes cracked and worn, they'll come through and replace it. Is that
Right,
correct?
right.
For as
That's-
long as you pay the $200 fee.
Right. And so that we also had, there's a whole other story about Calhoun and the Masonic Hall building, which is also no longer there, but it was used as Colonel Long's headquarters.
Now, where was it?
The Masonic Hall, it was down, if you go on down Main Street, down where the main part of town would have been, down, did you know where Boland's store was? Or any of oh man. Anyway, if you started on down Main Street, about halfway down through there, the water department, all of that is there now. And of course, when it was built, the Masonic Hall was built, the railroad wasn't even there, but it's over across where the railroad line is now,
Okay.
over in that area. And
On the back part. of
Right,
Calhoun.
right. And so it was built as the Calhoun Academy, actually, and then the Masonic Hall, the Masonic fraternity, purchased that from the Calhoun Academy in 1854, I believe. They were chartered in 1850. When Colonel Long and the Union Army came in and occupied Calhoun, they took over that Masonic Hall as their headquarters and used it as headquarters, and they knocked out holes into it, you know, where they could fire weapons, where they could see. Yeah, I know it. And so therefore, the reason we know all that is because, for the same reason, they applied for reimbursement from the government after the war, and all those records were at the National Archives, which we've also ordered. And that's a whole interesting story too. Used it as a part of a military hospital, and so hopefully we'll have another marker that will describe that one. The challenge of the markers is not even really designing them; it is coming up with the money,
The verbiage
to pay,
and the money.
and the money to pay for it.
Now, Volunteer Energy is very generous with their grants. That, you know, $500, $750 for items such as those, and very easy application to fill out. So I would suggest that that's a good place to look for that little chunk of money.
To try to
Yeah,
get
because there's a lot of individuals that will give the rest of it if we can get that first chunk of it.
that. Right.
Now, I want, Morgan, at some point in time when you're familiar with Charleston and the little town on the other side of the bridge is Calhoun. Well, prior to the removal of the Cherokees, if you were standing in what's now Charleston, you were standing in the Cherokee Nation.
Yeah.
And if you were on the other side of the water, you was in the United States of America. And you had to have a passport to come into the Cherokee Nation.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, Laura, I want you to tell about the original Trail of Tears little road that we have. No, I haven't found, but you guys have.
Determined
Been
with the
determined.
help of the National Park Service. Yes, that area right there that we're talking about, where that Shiloh
Meadowlands Park.
right where the Shiloh Church was, that road that is there originally went all the way through. Now it's it's cut in because of the railroad, and I said before there was the Highway 11, before there was the old Highway 11, that was called the road to Blair's Ferry, which is actually Loudon, Tennessee. And so they marked them from ferry to ferry because that was where, those were
That's why we have Blythe's
landmarks,
Ferry Road here in Cleveland,
Right.
and we're 28 miles from Blythe's Ferry.
because it was the road to the ferry. And so Calhoun was originally called Walker's Ferry because
John
of
Walker.
Chief John Walker, founded the town. And so Walker's Ferry was the crossing at the Hiwassee River, and Blair's Ferry would have been the crossing up for the Tennessee River, and it was up at Loudon. And so that little road runs right beside that church. And the National Park Service was actually able to determine, with the help of Brett
Riggs.
Riggs. Sorry. That was an immigration route as they brought the Cherokees in from North Carolina into Athens and down to go across the river to go over to the
Fort Cass in
immigration
Charleston.
depot. That's right. That was one of the original routes. And so we ordered signage, and so that route
That
is
says
marked.
original route, and that's really a big deal for the folks who go and stand where they think that their relatives have walked.
Right.
To stand on soil and not paved ground, because across that trucking place there that you can see from the highway,
Mhm.
that's where the original road bed. There's some of the that still looks like a road that's not paved, which is a big deal when you start tracing the trail.
Right.
Speaking of the Trail of Tears, the national meeting this year will be in Dalton, Georgia. So we won't have to travel so far this year.
No.
We went to Missouri last year, been to Tahlequah before to those meetings. So I'm real excited about that.
Right.
And so I encourage everybody to go. I think the annual dues are like $25 a year. And then the was it about $160 or something for the actual
The
registration
conference
fee.
itself, right.
Well, the conference is outstanding, and that includes field trips where they put you on a bus and they take you and show you really interesting things. I understand that they're going to go to Ellijay
Right.
to see the McNair plantation. I've never seen it, so I'm excited to see that. And they feed you unbelievable amounts of food while you're there, usually some kind of traditional food too, which I always think is a lot of fun. But anyway, that's going to be in Dalton in October. If you're interested, you need to go online and find the National Trail of Tears Association and read all about it.
Right. And if you need some other information about that, if you'll contact the Hiwassee River Heritage Center, Darlene Goins, she'll help you know find the website for that and everything, because it really, I've been twice now, and it really is heartwarming. And one of the reasons was because the Cherokee families and the descendants of those people that lived in this area are so appreciative of the work everyone is doing to
Identify the
and document that.
And I had traveled all the way to Tahlequah and stood by a sign that says, you're 230 miles from Tahlequah and you're 480 miles from Fort Cass, but Fort Cass had no signs. But Fort Cass has signs now.
That's right.
The National Park Service has arrived, so we're real excited about that. But that means a lot to those people,
Right.
and it's really interesting because when you tell them, I can tell them I'm from Cleveland, Tennessee, but if I tell them I'm from Fort Cass, they are really interested and they want to know what they can come look at, and I'm telling them it's more things all along.
Right. That's right.
Looks
Okay.
like we're getting a call.
Okay.
So I guess our phones are on. You're on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning.
Good morning, Tommy. Ron Moore.
Hey, Ron.
Hey, Ron, what's
Howdy,
going
Ron.
on?
Well, I'm here at a little wrestling tournament here in Williamson County, Tennessee, Franklin. And
A very historic place.
yes, we're at the horse barn, and getting ready to have the consolation matches. There's a handful of Bradley Bears and Blue Raiders and Mustangs will fight this morning, and they're wrestling this morning for third, fourth, fifth, or sixth place. So everybody wrestling this morning has earned a medal in the state tournament.
Nice.
Nice. And we have how many guys going to be in the finals for first or second place?
Bradley has 6. I think Cleveland has 2, and Walker Valley has 1.
Oh, good.
Then you take a couple of Saudi Daisy kids, and I think so. So Region 4 is probably the most dominant region in the state.
Yeah, when East Tennessee walks in, everybody moans. They're here.
Schools that have done well, Beach and Heritage, which are Heritage is up in Maryville. They're ranked third right now. So Bradley has won the state tournament. That part of it's over. The team part. So they
No one can catch them.
No, they're 100 points ahead, and probably the most that they could. The next closest team is like 108, and Bradley's 202.
Mm-hmm. I am so happy for Coach Smith because he has worked so hard for this, along with a lot of other coaches.
It's a great thing there, and I know this is not your topic this morning, but I'm proud of the whole Bradley County area there, and like I say, it's a good tournament. The usual 1 or 2 upsets and controversies in every tournament.
That happened. I know the guy from Saudi Daisy that probably should have won somebody got injured during the match, and so he lost that match because of that, and he's over in the consolations now, isn't he?
Yes. Now the injured player wasn't really injured. You know, if you want to get into the story here on the floor, he was basically the trainer said he was okay. The wrestler wanted to go, and his coach says, "No, he's hurt. He's not wrestling." And it was sort of there was a lot of question whether the coach did the right thing.
Well, I understand that the wrestler had enough integrity to go up to the other wrestler that had lost because of that and apologize that he did not want to win that way.
Well, and the young man from Saudi Daisy, Tucker Russo, a great guy, was a 2-time state champion, and no one was going to beat him here. I mean, he was so it's free for him. So the best he could do is third place now. And also his dad, Tucker Russo's dad, is Steve Russo, who owns Steve's Landing down in Saudi Daisy.
Oh, I did not know that. This is my favorite place to eat.
Yes, so we.
I did not know that.
Went to Steve's Landing. Steve Russo, and it's a great place. Just want to thank Tommy for coming in and running the board for us today. Since
he hasn't got to say anything yet.
Hey, I'm just learning. I'm listening and learning. I mean, I lived in that area, so
he's already learned a lot. And what he doesn't know is there's going to be a test at the end of the end of the show.
I couldn't keep up with it. Wanted to tell you real quick. Next week our show's going to be about the businesses of Charleston, not the old businesses of Charleston. Not. There's a lot of other history in Charleston. There's tons of history in Charleston, but we want to talk about the business. I talked to Richard Roberts last night, and his mother ran the store there right on 11, and it had old hardwood stores. It had the white meat counter back there, and it had a Hobart saw that could cut you bologna and stick it in slices if you wanted to. And the things that a lot of us grew up in, remember those old timey stores, neighborhood stores.
Hey, Ron, I got to say, Arnold just texted me. He's listening, and he said new food would enter the conversation when Ron got on.
Yeah. And a big match today is
he's just ignoring us, isn't he?
Valley and Colton Landers from Cleveland will wrestle each other. 2 hometown guys. And that'll be a heck of a fight.
Now tell me who it is again.
I can't think of Munoz's first name right now, but Munoz from Walker Valley.
Okay.
And Colton Landers from Cleveland.
Okay.
Wrestling for the state championship tonight.
Wow.
5 tonight.
And so I'm sure they have wrestled before. Who typically wins?
Well, it's interesting. They've met twice that I know of, and Colton won one, and then Munoz beat him in the region here 2 weeks ago or a week ago. So they're 1-1.
So it's just whoever shows up, right?
Right, and then of course Colton and Hunter Parker from Bradley County wrestled last night in the quarters, and they had swapped out, and Hunter got the bad end of that one and lost, and so Hunter will be going for third today.
Which is incredible.
Jay Adams and Austin Matthews are the three guys that will wrestle for Bradley this morning.
Not bad.
Then we have 6 guys who are in the finals could win state championships.
Now, are there any?
We've never had is 5.
Are there any Cleveland Bradley matchups in the final?
We have no Cleveland Bradley matchups, no Bradley Walker Valley, and the only local schools are Walker Valley and Cleveland. And the only people from our region, I think, Donnie, no, it's Brett Brown has a guy from Ottawa who's in our region. That's the only region matchups there.
No Saudi Daisy?
No, we don't have no Saudi Daisy.
Wow. Okay.
So
Well, thanks, Ron.
the state record for points in the state tournament is held by Bradley for 268 points in one tournament. I don't think this team will have a chance to get that far unless they just pin everybody out today.
Okay. But there's no one that can catch them.
Oh, no.
All right.
It's over. Hey, guys, I'll let you get back to
Thank you, Ron.
Well,
Talk to you later.
Hey, Ron, give us a call on Thursday night and give us all the
Or come by.
or
Maybe
come
he's-
by if you're not busy and give us the finals on all those.
All right, yeah, and I tell everybody to go down to Steve's Landing. Steve Russo won't be there today, but he'll be there next week.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Julio,
Bye-bye.
you're on.
The Steve's Landing's fabulous. They have fresh seafood. Seafood's my thing. I mean, the shrimp is incredible. It tastes just like the shrimp you get out on the coast and stuff.
That was your up to the minute wrestling.
Usually it's a hot dog report, but I know last time I went with
dog
Ron, we were given press passes because we were taking pictures for the Times and the Banner. And go ahead and answer that,
All right.
Tommy. And they gave us a free meal, and it was a hamburger, and it was really good hamburger. All righty. Good morning. You're on Old Town Cleveland.
Hey, this is Mr. Moon.
Hey, Mr. Moon, what's going on, buddy, in Birchwood?
Nice warm weather.
Yes, it is.
I just want to say that Southern Tradition is at Birchwood tonight.
And you got good barbecue?
Oh, the best.
Okay, and this is at across the street from the old Birchwood School.
Yes, ma'am, and it's at 7 o'clock.
Family fun,
Oh, family fun for everyone.
good music, good food to eat. How much is it to get in?
Everything.
How much is the admission?
$5.
Just
Not
$5.
bad.
All righty. Well, thank you, Mr. Moon, for letting us know.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
If you want to hear some good traditional country music mixed in with some bluegrass music, go on out to the Birchwood Opry tonight, 7 o'clock, $5 to get in, and they sell some really good barbecue, too.
And another phone call.
Okay. Good morning. You're on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning, Debbie.
Hey, Red, what's up, sister?
I have a question.
That always worries me.
I just wanted to ask you, that trip to LJ,
Yes.
where will it take you to in LJ?
Well, they said the McNair Farm. I do not know where that is.
The McNair Farm.
Yes.
I know where Chief Whitepath lived up there, but that's up on 515. Will they go there?
You know, I think what they usually do, Red, is they put us on a bus and they'll take us somewhere and they take you everywhere you can get to, within a few hours.
Uh-huh.
And so I would think that I didn't know that he lived up there.
Oh, yeah, he owned a bunch of land there. I used to play in the house he built.
Well, I know that he died in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, because I've been to his grave.
He was on that mark.
Yeah.
He was born over on Turnip Town. I know where that's at, too.
Well, Red, you may have to take me up into the Georgia mountains and show me around sometime.
Oh, it'd be interesting. If I knowed then what I know now,
Yeah.
I've had all kind of Indian things.
Yeah, I know. You just think it's always going to be there.
But I think they moved his house or it burnt or something. But I know where the place is where it was at because I played in it. One of my aunts used to live in it.
Is it marked at all?
Oh, yeah, there's a marker
Okay.
on the highway.
A marker that said Red played here? Is that what it says?
No, it's
Red was here.
Red was that Chief Whitepath, lived there.
Okay, well, I just need to look it up and go see it. But, this area has so much stuff,
Uh-huh.
and it's such a variety of stuff. that you can spend a lot of time going to look at things, and I like to go look at things.
Oh, yeah. That'd just be like going back home to me.
Okay.
I lived right down the railroad tracks from it.
Well, thank you, Red. That's very interesting.
Okay.
Bye-bye, darling. I just love our callers. Oh, I say that every week.
She's a good one of our
She-
one of
she
my
worries
favorite
me, though,
callers.
when she wants to ask a question.
Hey, she's.
I want
she's-
you, Laura, while I'm thinking about it, tell them about the swing bridge that was across. Well, just tell them. Okay. Now, when was that?
See, I don't know. I'm sorry.
I believe it.
Brian Reed, if you're listening, call in.
Okay, it wasn't a swinging bridge. It was called a swing bridge. And out in the center of the water, on one side, I believe it was stable. And on the other side, they could swing it around so that those big, tall.
Oh no! Oh! I thought you meant
No.
a pontoon
pontoon
type
boat.
bridge. Oh no! I know that story
Oh,
of the
well,
Calhoun
then
Bridge.
catch up
Yeah.
with me here, Laura.
I'm sorry. I'm back in the Civil War. You're talking about 1913. When okay.
I know you've told me about that before. She's getting old. She's forgetting
No,
stuff.
that's okay. We've got to move into another decade or two. No, the highway bridge that from Main Street in Calhoun, the old Highway 11, the bridge was built in 1913 that went across to Charleston, and that bridge was called a swing bridge, and the I'm never sure what you call them, like the pedestal, the supports. The one on the Charleston side, there were three, and the one on the Charleston side had a mechanism in it so that it split from the center and would have swung around so that the steamboats coming up the river could get under that bridge without having to take down their smokestacks. But Jake Carr, who knows lots about Calhoun, said that they only did that one time and that it did not work very well. And they were afraid, I think, that the bridge would fall into the water. And so they never used it again. And that is documented. There is a website called bridgehunters.com, which
you put the picture of the swing bridge on
right.
there.
I have an old original picture of that bridge. And with the buggies, the horse and buggies going across that bridge. And so, yes, that was interesting. And here we go again. I'm sidetracked, and is it time for...
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. Just a little bit of history about the railroad bridge itself. The railroad bridge across the Hiwassee there between Calhoun and Charleston was the first railroad bridge in Tennessee.
Uh-huh.
And, of course, it was damaged several times, by the during the Civil War, but it became a real bone of contention for the steamship traffic that was trying to go up and down the Hiwassee. And I am researching that at the moment because that's an interesting story unto itself. Also, just to think about that, about steamboats that came up from Tennessee.
Flatboats, I think they call
Well,
them.
and I said they could get as far as that bridge, and at certain times of the year they could get under the bridge and go all the way up to the mouth of the river, and that at other times the water was too high and they couldn't get under the bridge. There was even a lawsuit by a gentleman named Ben Ferguson who had a transportation company, couldn't get his boats up through there. But that's a story for another day.
If Laura and I each live another 80 years, we will be able to finish all the projects we have started. I'd like to say that Charleston, Calhoun, Hiwassee Historical Society will be having a meeting tomorrow, and it's about the life of Nancy Ward. And all of you know that she was a very famous Cherokee here that I believe lived most of her life in Benton. And what time does the meeting start?
At 3, it'll be at 3 o'clock.
At the Hiwassee Center.
Right, at the Heritage
Which is
Center.
at the Heritage Center, which is across the street from the old football field at the school.
Right.
And they would love for you to come, and
Right.
especially if you think you're a relative, I think I would show up. This is research of an intern.
Right, a Lee University intern, a history student.
And she's done all this research while
Mhm.
she's been working at the Heritage Center. So we'd like for you to come out and see what she has to say. I'm kind of curious to see if it will be the factual history or the flowery history that sometimes follows Nancy Ward that,
Right.
that's kind of
And they have some. I know that
heroin.
they have some new print images related to that. They're going to one of the display cases that's there. I think they're going to change that out too.
I think probably my favorite Nancy Ward story is that some fella up in Benton made a sculpture of what he thought that she would have looked like, and it was quite the statue. And for some reason, he ran out of money, and he sold it to somebody in Greene County, I believe. And Nancy was taken up and stood at the foot of a grave for a number of years. Well, the Historical Society paid $1,000 for the statue, and they were going to bring it back to Benton. But somewhere along the way, the statue had disappeared. So they go with a pickup truck to Greene County to pick up Nancy and bring her home. And when they got there, Nancy was not there. And so they couldn't get their money back. And so they held on to the receipt for a long, long time. And probably 30 years later, Nancy appears on a auction magazine on the front cover of an auction somewhere like in Maryland or something. And so the Polk County Historical Society said, foul, that she's ours. We paid for her. But no one could find the receipt.
Oh, goodness.
And so Nancy was quite attractive. I guess they made her exceptionally small. She was kind of a dwarfed-looking woman on this statue, and she's holding grain in one hand and a fish in the other hand. I don't know what the symbolism there is, but they couldn't find the receipt. They couldn't find anybody that would make them a duplicate of the receipt, and so they lost their money, and I don't know what happened to the statue. I imagine after a few years they auctioned her off. I don't know.
Probably so. Maybe
But
we'll find out a little
Maybe
more
we'll
about that
find. Maybe
tomorrow.
she may not even know that story because I'm a fountain of useless information. I'll tell her. All right, let's take a break. We're going to be back in about 5 or 7 minutes. Hang with us here on Old Town Cleveland.
You're listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WHOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Check into cash. Need a little extra cash right away? Who doesn't? Turn your car into cash at Check into Cash.
Get up to $4,000 with your car title only from Check into Cash. You get more cash with a Check into Cash title line of credit.
Turn your car into cash today at Check into Cash. Visit checkintocash.com for the store near you.
$4,000 title line of credit maximum based on value of vehicle and ability to repay. Subject to credit approval. See store for details.
After 135 years, Hardwick Clothes, America's oldest since 1880, has delivered on our commitment to produce the finest navy blazer in America. This limited edition blazer was announced as the style winner in Garden & Guns Made in the South Awards. Crafted in Cleveland, Tennessee, we use premium Italian wool from Vitale Barberis, custom Bimberg lining, and signature gold buttons. It's available through the finest men's stores or at hardwick.com.
know that U.S. Money Shops cashes all checks, even the ones most check cashers reject. Tax refund checks, government checks, payroll checks, and many more. And when you cash a check with U.S. Money Shops, we'll give you 10% off your next purchase. At U.S. Money Shops, we have everything you need at a fraction of regular retail. So stop by to one of our 11 locations or visit us online at usmoneyshops.com.
Buy or sell or buy today, the better way at U.S. Money Shops.
Some restrictions may apply. See store for details.
Yeah, you looking for something sweet? I know you are. Bring your little sweet self to the Village Bake Shop. Around since 1961, there ain't a baked good in the galaxy the Village Bake Shop can't whip up for you. So when you're ready to treat your mouth to a taste you won't soon forget, get over to the Village Bake Shop in the Village Green Town Center. Or give them a call at 476-5179. You dig?
Hello, my name is Andy Figglestaller with Ed Jacobs & Associates. We are an employee benefit and insurance broker in business for the past 20 years. The new healthcare law, also known as Obamacare, has finally arrived. The law is complex and the choices are confusing. You have questions, we have the answers. It is our passion to find cost-effective solutions for every client. The solutions will be different for every person or business. Let our knowledge, experience, and passion go to work for you. Contact us today and let us assist you through this process. Our phone number is 423-473-0202, or you can find us on the web at edjacobs.com.
Guns, guns, and more guns. That's right, folks. U.S. Money Shops has just received a large shipment of pre-owned Glock 22s, 23s, and the awesome Beretta 8040D Cougar. These guns are law enforcement trade-ins that start at just $379.99 while supplies last. At U.S. Money Shops, there's no shortage of guns, so if you're looking for a great deal on a newer pre-owned gun, then check us out first.
Buy or sell or buy today, the better way at U.S. Money Shops.
Visit usmoneyshops.com for the location nearest you.
And we're back. Not really sure why I chose the whole theme from Hawaii Five-0 to come back. It really didn't have anything to do with our show, but
It was about the ocean. It was about the ocean and the fish. You said seafood.
The seafood.
Right?
That's
That was
it.
what
That's
was.
it.
was
well, to be honest with you, I was scrolling through here and I've kind of been binge watching Hawaii Five-0 on Netflix recently. So I guess
There you go.
So
There
anyway,
you go.
It's
so
like Hawaii Five-0. Let's play the song.
yeah, exactly.
I want to tell y'all that Ron and I have started editing the Ducktown Basin documentary that we're making. And it's been really interesting to do that and talk about especially the unrest that went on up in that area where they had strikes quite often. And they also had a lot of political unrest to the point that several people kind of got killed in all these elections and things. And we're going to have some folks here in the next few months that are going to come on and actually talk about that. So I'm really looking forward to that. But it's basically while people are calling Ducktown and Copper Hill, when they grew up, it looked like Mayberry until election time. And then they'd have to bring in the National Guard to calm everybody down. But so it's a really interesting little documentary. And I even talked to some local people here yesterday about all that. Now, I'm looking at my notes. I'm sorry. Looking at my notes. Okay. What do you want to talk about now, Laura?
Well, can we back up just a little
We
bit?
can
about
put it in reverse.
Let's go back and think about the requirements for these markers. If that was
Yes.
the primary topic for today, because I think
And we never
that-
talk about what we're supposed to talk about.
talk about a tangent. I think that people are surprised to know that the federal government, the VA, pays for Confederate markers. And
Let's get this
Okay,
call,
go
Laura.
ahead.
Hold that thought. Write yourself a note. Good morning. You're on Old Town Cleveland.
Maybe this Bob Cash.
Oh, Lord have mercy, Bob. What's going on this morning?
Well, listen, I'm enjoying your program about the tombstones. That's really interesting. A lot of history there. But Ron Moore was talking a little while ago about wrestling. Do you know, did Red ever wrestle?
I'm sure she probably did.
I'd say she probably was, wouldn't you?
I would think so. Bob, last night I had left my TV on by mistake, and I kind of woke up, and it was pretty late, and there was some fellas on there doing live wrestling, and I watched it for a few minutes and said, that's the same moves from 1965, just in a different time. They haven't improved since then.
Oh, how about that? I'm telling you. Well, now look here. Has my little buddy Red called in yet?
No.
Red?
Yes, she has.
She did.
Yes, she has.
Oh, okay.
She was telling us she remembers where Chief Whitepath lived up in Georgia.
Well, now, how about that? The chief, huh?
Yeah.
Well, let's see here. If she calls back, be sure to tell her I want to know if she ever done any wrestling.
Okay.
I'll talk to you.
Bye-bye, Red. Bye-bye, Bob. Y'all got me tickled here.
All right.
All right, now, requirements for the markers.
Okay.
Well, what surprises me is people have been able to get these markers, but they chose to get non-military markers sometimes.
Right. There are, a lot of graves that are marked with private markers. And I've got a little timeline. I think that was why I went back. I was curious about that too. One of the reasons I had it on my mind again was, after the South Carolina controversy and the Confederate flag, and there was a lot of negative feedback about things like related to that the federal government was supplying the Confederate markers. And just to clarify some of that, I'm not a federal government employee, and like I said, I'm not a historian, but all of this information is available online. And I was just curious about how that all came about, because if you go back and think about it, part of it was related to pensions. Right at the end of the Civil War, federal pensions were given to the Union soldiers, and then in 1890 to their widows and dependents. That was the Union soldiers, federal soldiers. And in 1891, then, so here we're talking about, nearly 30 years after the war, that Tennessee granted pensions to indigent Confederate veterans, not the federal government. Tennessee granted them.
Oh,
and that's
okay.
why those pension applications are in the
state
state
archive.
archives
That makes
instead
sense. Okay,
of
I
in
never
the
thought
federal.
about that.
Right. And then in 1905, they granted pensions to the widows of the Confederate veterans. So in 1906, then, the federal government approved headstones for Confederate veterans who had died in a federal prison and were buried on federal property. And so they started that. So it kind of came about. And in 1929 is when the federal government would pay for the Confederate markers in private cemeteries. So 1929 minus 1865
Yeah.
is, it's 60
It took
years.
a while. It took a while. We'll come back to this one.
That's fine.
Good morning. You're on Old Town Cleveland.
Hello there.
Hi there.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, is everybody there invisible today?
Well, we couldn't quite get the camera working, but we are invisible.
We've lost so much weight.
Tell our secrets.
Tuned in here and I see this picture. I hear the voices, but I don't see anybody.
Well, it's just a miracle that we have voices. Because some days we don't even have that.
I just wondered. Second thing is, I just heard the end of that just now, where you said something about the Ducktown and Copper Hill, and they had to call the National Guard. What was all that about?
Well, there was a lot of political unrest in Polk County, as was in McMinn County, when the soldiers came back from World War II. there had been some folks that had been in charge for a long time that were intimidating the other voters and doing things that were kind of illegal. And so the soldiers that came back from World War II said, no, we're not going to have this. And so they kind of took over the elections, took over the courthouses in the elections. And I believe as late as 1951, there was one up at Benton. The GGL, they were called the Good Government League. The GGL took over the courthouse, and that was actually in Life magazine in 1951. And I think that was pretty much at the time that it started dwindling down. But there were instances where the ballot boxes left Copper Hill, and as they were coming down the river road with the ballot boxes, they were stopped by men with machine guns, and the ballot boxes were stolen. And by the time they got to Benton to be counted, there were a lot more votes for the other side in there.
I have heard stories about that, but I hadn't heard the whole thing.
Well, the whole thing, like I say, is we're trying to find some folks that actually remember seeing the National Guard come into Copper Hill and take over Copper Hill. And as I understand it, the soldiers lined up on one side of the street armed, and the people from the GGL lined up on the other side of the street, and they just stood there and stared each other down for quite a number of hours. And no one threw the first rock or no one fired the first shot, or it would have been a bloodbath, I'm sure.
Yeah, I suppose that's probably a good thing that they didn't do anything.
Yes, it was. And so I think that was kind of the beginning of the end when they saw that, there were other ways to accomplish those things. But we do have people, and for a great number of years, all my life, everybody that talked about it would talk about it around the kitchen table. They would dare not say anything in public, because people from all sides of that thing, the Republicans, the Democrats, and the GGLs, were still alive and well in the communities, and nobody wanted to hurt anybody's feelings or nobody wanted to stir up the mess. And so they didn't talk about it. But we do have some people now that are approaching 80 years old that were youngsters when all that happened that I think are going to come on and talk about it. And they're talking about it in the documentary, which was really a surprise to me. But it was the women who said, it's time that we talk about this.
Now, what's the documentary? What is that?
It's going to be about the life and times of the people in Ducktown Basin, which is Copper Hill, McKaysville, Turtletown, the whole area up there. And we're talking about what it was like to live without vegetation on the grounds, because, as you know, it looked like the surface of the Mars for years. And they're talking about shopping at the company store and not having to lock their doors at night, and everything was really calm and peaceful until election time, and then it wasn't.
Then it all broke loose.
But we're going to have that finished. I'm kind of shooting at May. I think that we'll probably show it up in the Copper Basin in May, and then we'll have a showing here probably at Walker Valley in June. And I think if you're interested in history, you're going to be really interested to see this.
Yeah, well, I'm from there originally, but I moved from there when I was a kid.
Yeah, a lot of people had to when they had strikes and there wasn't enough work. And, of course, the plants all closed down in 87, I think. And now it's really sad to go up there because there's very few businesses. But I've seen pictures where, it looks like downtown Chattanooga. In Copper Hill. There was a store in every building. There were restaurants, 8 car dealerships, 6 gas stations just in Copper Hill.
That was big.
It was really big. And when I even talked to Ron Singleton, that was a basketball coach up there, and he, in 1987, was sure that they were going to win the small school division state championship. And when the strike hit, families moved out of town, and he lost like 3 or 4 key players, and then there was just no way that he could win. But just hang on. We'll tell you more all about it. And
I have one other quick question.
Okay, go ahead.
I have heard that there's a documentary being made, something about Cleveland and the Cherokees, and about the terms from the Bible about redigging the wells. That the well water in Bradley County was the main reason the Cherokees were here and whatever. And somebody's making a documentary about that. Do you know anything?
I haven't heard a word about that.
I would like to know. They said there's a house somewhere, or a building somewhere in Cleveland, that they're now going to remove the house, going to tear it down, because one of the old wells this building was built over this old well, and they're going to take the house down and redig the wells and get, try to get historical information from that. And I just wondered if you knew anything about it.
Would you be talking about Julian's Chapel?
I don't know.
Okay.
I just told you everything I know.
Okay, well, Laura and I pretty much got our fingers on the pulse of history around here, and we were both perplexed about that and have not heard anything about that. Now, it's a good possibility that, like, it's a history project that high school kids are doing or something, but we're not knowledgeable of that at this moment. I do know that Julian Chapel up in the Charleston community is where they met and formed Bradley County government in 1838 or something, and there was a church there, Julian's Chapel, and that building is being taken down at this moment. It was on private property, and it just got beyond them, and they couldn't keep it under a roof, and we're really sad about that. Well, thank you so much for calling, and thanks for being a listener. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You never know where we're going to go on this show.
And I know, and I didn't know, I knew that Julian's Chapel, the church, was being taken down, but I didn't know the history of that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's where Bradley County was formed, right there around some spring on that piece of property.
It's at Tasso.
Close to Tasso. Okay. Now, let's turn the phones off for just a second,
How do
Mr.
you do
Tommy.
that? Is it this button?
Oh, well, if you don't know, don't push a button you don't know, Tommy.
Yeah, we'll try. I
Okay.
saw Doc do it a couple of weeks ago
Okay.
whenever he was doing
Okay.
Old Town Cleveland. So
We occasionally have to do that so we can finish a thought, and then we turn the phones back on. Okay, Miss Laura.
Well, and I said, and I think I was explaining about the evolution of the government supplying these markers,
Oh,
and
yes.
about that there was some controversy about that.
What surprises me about that, Laura, is in 1895, well, the groups had started having reunions. The Union soldiers had a reunion, the Confederate soldiers had a reunion. And about 1895, when they developed Chickamauga Battlefield, was the first time that they had met on the same soil as a united group. So it looks like to me that the soldiers got there a lot faster than the government did.
Right, I think so. And there, during that time, I said, I went back and was looking, and I said there was confusion. People thought that the Confederate soldiers had received a pardon, which is not true. The Confederate soldiers are not U.S. soldiers. That was never what happened. People got confused about it, and I said when they granted the pensions to the widows, I said that it kind of evolved from that. I think it was kind of a responsibility, and so you at this point you really you can't take sides about it. It is history, and like I said, the reason that I'm interested in it is really as the grave marker itself. The family wants to acknowledge the military service, but
there's the situation too where they didn't want empty graves. I mean, unmarked graves in the national cemeteries.
Right.
So that it all makes sense.
Right.
It makes sense.
And we're talking primarily about these two that are recent that I had done. You can get them for any other service. It's not just the Civil War. These are just the ones that I had worked on. Actually, what instigated even further back, was Ellen Rogers was interested in getting the replacement marker for John L. McCarty, for the War of 1812 marker up in the Calhoun Cemetery, and he was the agent at the Indian. I mean, the clerk at the Indian Agency.
Yes, he signed a lot of the where he paid for supplies for folks to go on the Trail of
Right.
Tears.
If they've had a marker and it is damaged or destroyed or illegible, which is what happened with his, he had a private marker there in the Calhoun Cemetery, and it was broken, but because of the WPA record, we knew that was his. And so you can get a replacement one for that. If they already have a private marker, the government does not supply an additional marker for them for this. After 1990, they will supply the supplemental marker if they died after 1990. But for these, they do not do that. And so, back when I started the mapping of the Calhoun Cemetery, I brought my list, that there are 18 Confederate soldiers in the Calhoun Cemetery with private markers. But see, that doesn't acknowledge their military service, but that has to be left up to the family, to try to do that. Now, we did do the supplemental markers for the War of 1812 because it was the same thing. There were 7 veterans of the War of 1812, which is really an extension of the Revolutionary War. There were 7. There's 5 in Calhoun and 2 down at Shiloh, and their markers were private markers, so they had no acknowledgement that they were, they had served in the War of 1812. And so the Historical Society, we ordered markers, companion markers.
I need to
installed those.
order a marker from 1812. Can you help me with that?
Yes, the original marker or a supplemental.
He does not have a marker.
Oh.
But I know where he's at.
Yes. I can help you with that.
Well, now, why I didn't call you, I don't know, because I've asked both the McMinn County and the Bradley County SARs to help me, and they say, yeah, we're going to help you, Deb, and I haven't heard back from them.
Right.
So let's get started on that. I do have a relative,
right,
and his entire family is buried in this little section in Bethel Church down in Black Fox. He donated the property for the cemetery, but he has no marker there. So guess who's in that empty spot?
Right.
He has to be there.
Right.
And in E.L. Ross's little book here, he says that he's buried so many feet from the front door of the church.
Oh, is
Thank
he really?
you, E.L. Ross. Because all of those, I think, pretty much would be all the documentation we would need.
Right.
Probably has a death certificate that says he's buried there.
Right. And the War of 1812 military records are on that Fold 3 website.
I may have to get you to look him up because I am not a member of that
Okay.
yet.
And so
I look at it and I'm lost and dazed and confused. I need for you to train me how to look at it.
Well, we can sure
Do you think that the Confederate guys who got markers from the U.S. government had to, they didn't get pardons, but they had to pledge that they were going to support the U.S. government? What was that called? Do you remember? They all took the pledge, the oath of allegiance.
Yeah.
That's the big words. That's the big third grade words. Oath of allegiance to, and everybody here in Bradley County that had been a Confederate soldier took the oath of allegiance except Cincinnati Apperson, and he decided he wasn't going to do that.
So
He was very proud of that fact.
Did they? And so they did that. I guess I'm asking that question to receive their pension, not to receive the marker, but to receive their pension.
Right.
They had
I
to
think
do
that they probably had to do that to get their pension, and like I say, most people took it.
Right.
Yeah, some people
Those
did.
$8 a month pensions.
And we had a lady here in town, Laura, that still was receiving her widow's pension in the 1970s. She married an older man when she was like 15 or 16, and she'd walk in here down at the Cherokee Valley Federal Credit Union every month with her itty bitty check, and it was always a big hoo-ha there because everybody wanted to see the check.
Oh, wow.
So, I believe Mrs. Gibson, that was the Francis Marion Gibson's wife. Now, I can't remember what I had for breakfast, but I can remember his name.
Also, I said we talk ahead and then I back up. Well, when we were talking about, excuse me, the Shiloh Church, and I said I would go back and forth with those. Of course, like I said, it was built in 1824. Up where the Methodist Church, it was the Methodist Episcopal Church South eventually, but I said that the Methodist Church, which is my home church, and it was up there where the gazebo was, and it was formed in 1820, so it was actually even older than the Shiloh Church, and I know that we repeat a lot of the things when we're on here. Well, it all ties together because that was where the Cherokees would have attended church, because there were not churches in the Cherokee Nation at that time in the early 1800s, and so even after the Cherokee Agency moved there into that what became Fort Cass, the Lewis Ross, his daughter is buried there.
Well, let
in the
me ask
Calhoun
you a question
Cemetery.
about that. Little, what was her
Sarah
name?
Elizabeth.
Sarah Elizabeth died, and her dad owned property at Fort Cass, which is Charleston.
Right.
Very prominent, very rich man.
Right. The brother, Lewis Ross, was the brother of John Ross,
the chief.
Mm-hmm.
Little girl dies, and he buries her in Calhoun. Could he not bury her in Charleston, or was there a place to bury anybody then?
Probably not a place to bury anybody there. The Charleston Methodist Church also dates back early, the fairly early 1820s. But apparently they came to Calhoun to church. That's where the stores would have been. The post office was in Calhoun. It was really the town. And also, if you go back and look at records, sometimes it would refer to the agency being in Calhoun, but that was because that was where the post office would have been. And Charleston wasn't named Charleston then. That area didn't really have a name other than it being the agency.
The swampy place.
Right.
The swampy
So they
place.
came over and, and so, the Madison Carruthers Hawk, is also Cherokee. He's buried there. And
So we had all these encampments in what is now Charleston.
Right.
16, something like that, encampments. There were also small encampments in this 12-mile long, 4-mile wide area that was referred to as Fort Cass. Lots of people died there. Where are they buried?
And that's a really
That's
good
big
question.
mystery.
Yes, that's right. I've even asked that to some of the people from out of Tahlequah to ask where they said, they're just buried in unmarked graves, probably scattered around. Some of those graves were probably later, excavated during times when people plowed ground and things like that. And
So they just have to probably
there's-
take people outside the enclosure and bury them, which is really sad. But I know that there were some people that were exhumed over on the Varnell farm, and those remains have been at the McClung Library now since 1938. Is there any clue about those, if they were pre-removal or removal? We don't know.
I don't know. I do know that I've seen in some of the older agency records, some of those are online also. And any of these things that we're talking about that are available online, even Fold 3 is a subscription service, but you can go to a library, go to a local library, and they probably have subscriptions like you can get on Ancestry. And so
I know that the public library here, you have to have a library card, a current library card, and I think they give you a PIN number, and then you go over to the history branch and you can get on Ancestry for free.
Can you?
It's a little bit of a limit. It's not quite as extensive as the version I have at home. Ron always knows the perfect anniversary gift to buy me. Buy me Ancestry, and I'll leave him alone. I'll dig around those dead people for hours. Well, and he says it's true. We'll be out at a restaurant or something, and somebody starts asking me about an ancestor or something. Well, I just pull it up on my phone,
Right.
and see if I can find it real fast on Ancestry for them.
Right. And people, for the most part, are very appreciative of that, too. What I was going to say was, in those old agency records, occasionally you'll see where they've paid someone to build a coffin, build a casket,
There was always a casket builder in each group that left here. And Mr. Ragsdale was it for the Bell Route that I've done extensive studies on. And it was kind of sad, he built 18 coffins for that one group of people. Yeah. It was ugly. It was real ugly. I wanted to say something too, and it's off the subject again, but that's what makes me and Laura so fun, is that I was looking out my back window this morning and I was seeing the new concrete bridge going in across APD 40. And I remembered that for a number of years, as I'd stand there and look out the window, I would see an old log barn. Now, it had been enclosed, but I knew it was a log barn. And at some point in time, they were building a new building there, and they were going to tear down that barn. And it's people like Miss Bess Neal that has really saved the history here in Bradley County. She had that barn moved over to her farm, Blythewood Farms. And every time I pass there, I always think about her being one of our leaders in saving history in the area. And that barn is visible from the road, and it is obviously now a log barn, but she paid to have it moved, and she's one of my heroes here locally. And I just like to say good morning to her. She listens a lot. I believe she's closer to 100 than she is 90 now. And every now and then you see her out on her golf cart strolling around on the farm. But I just like to say good morning to her.
There are a lot of those buildings like that Oh, we were going to talk about the Shiloh. I mean,
That's
the
it.
Shelton
That's it.
Church.
Oh, we need to talk about the Shelton Church. Shelton Church is one of those pictures that when we put it on Facebook, Facebook always goes crazy because it is a gorgeous, gorgeous building that's been vacated for how long now?
Well, I know that it was built in 1903.
Okay,
and
well,
so
just start
I'm
at the
not sure.
beginning and
Okay.
tell us about it.
Once upon
And
a
this is the
time-
one that
Yes,
This
the,
is out at
it's the older white building in Lamontville.
Right. If you go out 163, what is now 163, of course, that's we call it the Lamontville Road. You know, originally the Lamontville Road went down right to where Bowater is, you know, down by the river.
Yeah.
But, and so the Shelton family was one of those patriarchal families, you know, one of the early families that came in here, and they lived there on the river. The way that you would access that now would be to go out 163 to where the old Lamontville store is, and it's County Road
4, I think.
I think 2 turns over the other way to Spring Creek,
Mhm.
and I think 4's the other way. Okay, and so on a map, it would still be probably called Shelton Road. There's a Shelton Road and Civils Road, but if you turned left there and went out that road, just maybe a half a mile, there was a beautiful old church that was there. The Shelton family had a huge home down on the river called Sheltola. And that could be another story. I wish you could see a picture of that. It was really advanced for its day with, you know,
A lot of the
indoor plumbing and
men,
everything.
wow, the Sheltons are in my Confederate history book.
Are they?
Yes. yes.
And so the Jenny, Virginia Muncie Shelton, would have been the granddaughter of the founder, James Shelton. And she died in 1900 of a self-inflicted gunshot wound to her abdomen.
Wow.
And we never knew that it was a suicide. We knew the story of the church and that it was named for her and that it was the Jenny Shelton Memorial Methodist Church. But in some fairly recent research or looking back, and we saw the stories of that. And Joe Bryan has written an article which is going to be in the next issue of McMinn Life magazine about the church, and it has some pictures in there, and I'm not going to give away all of the hint. You need to look at that. I said he has contacted
which
some
is
of the
available
Shelton
in
family.
all of the restaurants and all of those main drag
and
places.
we will have her bring some there to the Heritage Center in Charleston, and they'll be out there in the rack and everything. And so I'm not sure what the publication timeline for that. It will be out probably within
the
the
spring.
next
He
month,
was saying.
right?
Mm.
And so
Where is Jeannie Berry?
where is she? She's, if you go on down that road just a little, well, actually, you have to go down past a private home now, but there's a Shelton Cemetery there. And of course, it's fairly grown up, but she is buried down there with a lot of the rest of the Shelton family.
Now, I'm picturing that area in my head, and I'm glad you're talking about it, because, you know, I've been thinking about that area a lot lately. And, you know, because like I said, I used to, you know, off the air, I told you, I lived at Camp Cherokee. My grandfather was there from 76, 77 till he passed away in 96. I lived out there with him from about 93 to 96, and then I took over as caretaker from 96 to 2001. And so we had a four-wheeler, and one of the places I liked to ride whenever I was a kid, there's a lot of trails back there, but there's also, if you go out of the camp and take a right, and then you hit County Road, I was thinking it was 2, but I guess it's not.
There's no rhyme or reason to those road numbers.
No, there's not. There's not. I know the camp,
I think they drew them out of a hat or something.
well, Camp Cherokee is on County Road 1. Then you go to the back of the camp and turn right, and then take the first right, and it goes up a hill. And I'd ride that road out to where it ends, and then it turns into that county road that the church is on. And so, you know, it would come to, and then I think there was a house there where those two roads meet. And so, is that where you're talking about as far as where the cemetery's at? Okay.
Right. If you go on down now, there's still a great big white house out there.
Yeah.
And I think the G family lives there, and to access the cemetery, you would have to go on down past that house. That cemetery is down, which would have been down close to where the original Shelton home place was, and so it is down that direction. If I'm sure that family doesn't want people coming in and out of that. The road is very narrow, and so the polite thing to do, I suppose, would be to stop and ask permission. You know, legally, if you have a family member in the cemetery, you have access to that. But that is where
Still a courtesy.
I usually stop and say hello. I'm looking for a graveyard. Do you have a big dog? Because I've been chased back to my car a few times
and hung up in some barbed wire occasionally. Yes,
I have.
And so, but the Shelton Church, the reason that it's really on our minds, it's a beautiful, beautiful building that is just disintegrating. It is falling down. It's past salvage point at this point. Apparently, it's gorgeous. It is a beautiful old building. It had stained glass windows in it, which of course are gone. And I said it really is another one of those beautiful country landmarks.
So is it on private property?
It is.
And so I would imagine somewhere along the way someone was asked, I guess the family just didn't want to sell it.
Probably. And you think about it, and it's easy for us to say, why didn't somebody save that? But you
so
have
expensive.
to have the money. Yes.
Big money.
Right. To be able to salvage it, especially when the foundation is, starts disintegrating. Well, it's kind of like the Cherokee cabin, that's out on 163 the other direction going out toward Etowah.
So that church was built in 03.
Right.
And then, or in 1903,
right.
And then it lasted through.
I'm not sure when they had church services in it, but I'm not sure when those ended. And maybe Joe's got that in his article. Joe, are you listening?
I'm thinking that it probably ended about the time that indoor plumbing came popular. A lot of those little old churches like that were abandoned at that moment when they were going to have to put in plumbing and stuff, and they decided that it would just be easier to build a more modern building with,
Such a shame.
Yes, it is.
It is.
Now, the Red Hill United Methodist Church down on Red Hill Road is still pretty close to its original. It's got the one tower. And in the 1960s, they put a restroom on each side at the front, and that kept it off the Register of Historic Places. I thought I was going to have a temper tantrum in the parking lot because I'm going, the original wood is on the outside of the building. It has original windows. The interior is still the little planks. And yes, they put down carpet and they put in bathrooms, but now if it'd been in a shambles and it had been falling down, it would have been approved.
That makes no sense.
No. I was, yeah.
When little things trigger another kind of memory with me. And thank you, listeners, if anybody's still out there listening. I just happened to think about this too. Going back to the Shiloh Church,
which is the little one that's in the cemetery across from Meadowlands Park
that was torn down.
By the soldiers.
And after the reimbursement came, they did build a Shiloh Presbyterian Church in Charleston. That I think it was built maybe around 1910-ish, and it had services there until about the 1950s, and it was torn down. And we had some records from that. Those, after it moved, we found some. I had an archivist go and look up those records in Pennsylvania, and she found some records, but we had never seen any Presbyterian records for the Shiloh Church. We knew that's the name of it because of the National Archive records, but as far as it actually being documented anywhere in a Presbyterian record, we had never seen it. Here's the way things happen. We use the word serendipity quite a bit now because things happen and they're no longer a coincidence. When I was looking back, we were going to try to find an image to put on that marker, and I just did a Google search on white frame Presbyterian churches. And up popped the Candies Creek Church, not the picture of the old Candies Creek Church, but a reference to a link about it in Presbyterian records. And when I clicked on that link, there are the records from 1825 for the Candies Creek Mission Church. But you know what else was there? The Shiloh Presbyterian Church records. not individual membership, but it was the statistical reports that were submitted every year at their annual conference, and it gave that church, it gave Candies Creek, it gave their membership, how many people were baptized that year, whether they were youth, the total number of ministers.
How many people they'd kicked out,
I found,
for
that's
lusting
right.
in their minds.
I found the, we got time for me to read something.
Go ahead.
Oh, my gracious.
We'll make time.
I said, well, I don't know.
Well, there's nothing more fun than reading church records. Laura and I live a sheltered life, but you get in 1950 and they kicked people out of church for watching TV and dancing. Oh my,
This is,
but lusting in their minds was my favorite one I ever found, is that he was kicked out of the church for lusting in his mind.
That's
and I'm
right.
thinking, okay.
Well, the minister that was assigned to this Shiloh Presbyterian Church, his name was Fielding Pope. So I did a Google search on him. Can I read this?
Go ahead.
This is a newspaper article that was written obviously by a Union supporter who says, title, "A Rebel Preacher." A bad specimen of a rebel preacher, as East Tennessee affords and society is cursed with, is the Reverend Fielding Pope, a Presbyterian preacher of Blount County. After he was in Calhoun and Athens, he moved to Blount County. If managed by hook or crook to get up a revival among his deluded followers and connected it with the raising of volunteer forces for the rebel army, he preached to them that God was on their side and got up from the mourner's bench and lectured them a while, and then advised them to go into the rebel army and assured them if they did that they'd die in the cause and they'd be saved. We've known this old hoary-headed rebel for 35 years. He was an anti-slavery man until he married a widow lady owning a gang of slaves, and then he turned rebel. He ought to be sent south, and that's without delay. So apparently...
Tell us what you really think, right?
Really?
I know it. I just thought that was interesting that was the one minister that I can track back to that church, and he apparently, which I'm not surprised that he would have been, in a way, a rebel supporter, even though the Presbyterian Church in general, was against slavery. They supported the colonization in Liberia. I've gone back and read quite a bit of those.
Yeah, that's
records.
Brian Reed's the first one that mentioned that to me, and I was, what?
I
Okay,
never
if
heard
you
of it
go
either.
to across the bridge between Charleston and Calhoun, you turn right, and you go over there and go past the churches and stuff, and you get close to the vineyard that's on the left hand side of the road. There's an old cabin off down in the valley there that you can just kind of see the roof of it from the road.
Right.
Is that the cabin you were talking about?
Yes.
Who do we think that belonged to?
When
the Park Service came in?
They did, and MTSU. Oh my gracious! I was trying to think of his name. Van West.
Thank
Carol
you.
Van West.
Don't look at me. I can't
Dr.
remember.
Carol Van West was with the Middle Tennessee State Preservation. Historic preservation, whatever
it is.
And anyway, they came in and they went down and looked at that and think that it was an original Cherokee cabin. And if that really is an original Cherokee cabin, it's one of the very few that still remains. It too is in a sad state. It floods down in there, and the foundation of it has been disintegrating some. They took some pictures of it, and in fact, it's on his blog, Dr. Van West's blog. As supposedly they went back and tried to find a lot of those old cabins. Then were modified, and they would add on to the outside.
A lot of times
of
when they
them.
start to tear down a 1940s house, they'll find a log cabin down in the center of it, and those are the ones that are preserved. But the ones like that have been flooded from the bottom and the roof has not been intact all over for a long time, start to deteriorate.
Right. Of course, that would have.
Do we know what Indian?
No.
I thought it was a doctor's house.
Well, Dr. Allenberg Grubb, had part of that reservation out that direction, and but he was not Cherokee. He married a Cherokee.
Oh,
and so that the investigation of that kind of played out for the moment. But it's another one of those things that it would take money to salvage it, but it would be a shame for it to
Rot down.
right.
Yeah.
But it is on private property, and the property owner at this point, I spoke with him back in the fall, and he was hoping that he might be able to try to figure out a way to either raise it so that it doesn't continue to be damaged, until something could be done with it. But it's interesting now. There's so much interest. I don't know if it's this generation of people, why there seems to be this renewed interest in all of this.
It's because we have started talking about it. We, as in the community of historians, have started trying to, make people realize that this was the last Cherokee Nation east of the Mississippi, and that Fort Cass existed. And we found the map of Fort Cass. And I can get you in my car and follow those same roads, and it takes you straight to where those encampments are.
Right.
And Calhoun, and after the removal, the city grew up in Charleston. It didn't grow up in downtown Cleveland. The doctors and the lawyers and all the people that you had to study with were in Charleston.
The first
and then,
Bradley County High School was in Charleston.
Yes, it sure was.
I find all this stuff amazingly interesting, because when my parents got married, we moved.
And what year would that have been, my child?
1980.
1980.
I was 5 when my parents got married.
Okay.
And then my dad adopted me, and a few years later. But anyway, the first place we lived was for 6 months was with my aunt in Calhoun on that back road. Just you got that back road, and then you got the field, and then the railroad track right there and that's where I lived. And and that's where my granddad's house was.
Right.
Before
on the River Road.
Yeah,
I know
before he moved.
I know where it was.
Yeah, before he moved to the moved to
Your
the camp.
grandmother was my brownie leader.
Makes some perfect sense. Yeah. So, but to hear the history of that, because I grew up across.
It's
right,
addictive.
I mean,
let me tell you,
right
it's
there,
addictive.
right there.
We live in the most historically significant area that's underdocumented in the United States of America. And it's about high time, and there's just been a handful of people that's really made this Charleston Calhoun thing happen. My whole involvement has been to watch and cheer, be the cheerleader. But I've been down here on the south end of Bradley County, trying to get stuff done.
Well, there's only so much time and so much resources that you can have to do that. Because whenever you get into something like that, like you were saying a while ago, you scratch the surface of something, and then there's so much more.
It just leads to something else.
And Laura's really good at seeing what nobody else can see. She can see the relationship, or what she thinks the relationship's going to be, and then she proves it.
Yeah.
But now, if she says it, it's not guesswork. She's done some really serious research. I try to. But she finds funny things like that newspaper article too. I love to go to the Hiwassee Historical Society, or Charleston Historical Society, when they have meetings, because she always puts in funny stuff that she's found in the newspaper, because you used to be able to print just most anything you thought, and you didn't get charged with slander.
Right. One thing that's interesting too is that almost all the research that I've done has been online. I live about 30 miles west of Nashville, and I'm fairly close to the state library, and I do go there some. But that's another reason I think that there's this, huge interest in research, because more and more things are available online.
I can sit in my pajamas at 11 o'clock at night and look up stuff instead of going to the moldy libraries and dig through the books, which is still a good thing to do too.
Right.
I think I want to really encourage everyone to get their photographs printed. I know I have thousands of pictures of my grandbabies that none of them, or hardly any of them, are printed, and they're not going to have those shoe boxes to dig through when they get older. And I think we're going to lose a whole lot of history because we don't write letters anymore, and because we don't get pictures printed.
You're right.
I just added you. I just sent a friend request because I want to follow you a little bit more. I want to see this stuff.
You have a fan club of one person, Laura.
There you go. Oh, my gracious. I said, I'm glad you're interested. I said, I have the 1819 plat of the town of Calhoun. John Walker, formed that it was his reservation, and it was platted out in 1819. And those same property lot numbers are still used on the property records. When you get your property tax records, those same 200-year-old numbers are still on there.
So if you find that your grandpa lived on lot number 11, you can go there and stand there and look maybe at the empty space where it used to be, but you can at least, I mean, Mr. Only lived there.
Right.
Do you know where he lived?
Well, and actually, I found an old newspaper picture, and in the background you can barely see his house, and it said that that is his home. No, I don't. And I said, he had a lot of records, and in an interview with his wife later after he died, she said most of those had been committed to the fire. Don't you just wish that you still had those?
At some of his pension application, where he's basically telling the government they're going to have to support him or he's going to starve, he said all the valuables he had was a few rare books, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what were those rare books? And I'm sure that he documented stuff. Document. But when you have no children and you're gone, a lot of times your stuff is just pitched out.
Right.
And I think that's why we can't find a picture of him. Although he said he had his picture made, and he sent it to the pension board along with his rewriting of the Dixie song. I haven't found that either.
Don't know where that one is.
So how much time, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
go ahead.
How much time do you think you spend a week?
That's all we think. That's all we think about.
I know, that's right. And Debbie's still fully employed. I said I'm retired, and so I said this is and it's an odd combination because part of it is family genealogy work, and I'll be sidetracked on that. And I said, but I would guess that I probably spend maybe 4 hours a day on something related to some of these projects.
Very
like I
cool.
said, I've gotten sidetracked.
Now the bad thing is, like with this Copper Hill documentary, in the midst of interviewing these people, I'm staring at them thinking I could do a 2-hour documentary on you. You have people that opened businesses, that was in World War II, remembers the strike of 1939, lived there all of his life. And you think every project leads to another project. I've got the East Tennessee Racers, the old dirt track racers from the 50s and 60s that are sitting and twiddling their thumbs waiting for me to get there because they saw the documentary about dirt track that we did here, and they want one about them. We showed it in Knoxville, and when it was over, we thanked everybody for coming, and you think, well, okay, everybody's going to leave now. Well, I realized I was standing and talking to someone, and there was a line forming behind me. And it was all these little men going, I have pictures, come record my story. I want to tell people about when I did so-and-so. And they told me all about the racing careers. But because I got sick, I was supposed to do it that summer, and it didn't get done. And the Copper Hill one's running behind now. And so they're just going to have to wait till next summer.
Yeah, there's lots to be done. I said when you start into it, as a non-historian, I said you think, oh, everything's already been discovered.
No.
I have to share one thing.
Go ahead.
While you're that interested, I said one of my best finds, though, I said if you go on out the River Road, the Hiwassee Baptist Church is way up on the river if you keep going out that way. And I said they have their original church records back to 1824.
But the thing of it is, it's been typed.
And so we took those, and
they went from, wait a minute, let me tell this. They went from house to house to house in the community because they knew where the records were.
Well, there was one person, the secretary of the church
had
those.
them. Okay, I'm sorry.
Them.
That must have been another story.
Well, it probably is. And I said, but what was funny about it was that we were borrowing those old records, and Joe Bryan and I did this, and some of his students, and when we had the records in our own home, he said he'd slept with his under his pillow because if his house caught on fire, that was the first thing he was going to grab was to get those records out. But we went back and transcribed those, and I did an Excel spreadsheet, so I've got all the entries of those. And we did them not all the way to current date, but through about 1905 maybe. And Troy Wayne Poteet is the national director of the
He's
Trail of
going to
Tears.
be on our show in May.
Is he? And, I've met him now several times, and he had sent an email to Darlene, and he told me that the Hanks family, he grew up by them in Webbers Falls, Oklahoma, and he was interested to know if we knew anything about them. And when I got to thinking about that, I thought that name sounds so familiar. And I found the record where Margaret Morgan Hanks Eifert, later she remarried, had been baptized into that Hiwassee Baptist Church. She was a Cherokee, and they also, had slaves that were members there, but she was a Cherokee. She was baptized there at her and her daughter, and had joined that church. And later she left and she moved to Webbers Falls, Oklahoma. And after she died, they had a big memorial. This is all documented in those church records. So I was able to go back to the original record. Joe had taken pictures of them and print that off in the transcription and take them to Troy Wayne so that he could take them to the Hanks family that now lives in Oklahoma, and let them have the records from what would have been about their 5th great-grandmother's baptism into the Hiwassee Baptist Church.
We really need to get those printed. We need to work on that. That means so much to those people, and that's one of the reasons that I have typed the valuations of the entire Cherokee Nation. There were records that indicated everybody that was leaving here. Somebody came and did an evaluation on their house, and it would say that they had a log cabin that was 2 stories, and it was 16 by 14, and they had 60 acres, 40 of that being behind rails, some of it being in the garden, how many stables they had, pig pens, chicken houses, all of those kinds of things. It did not include cattle or slaves or any of that stuff, and how many fruit trees they had. And for somebody that's not a researcher, it's just going to be a lot of gobbly-gop. But when you get to those people out in Tahlequah who can get a copy of that, and it's not in that old handwriting, it's going to be gold to them. And I've met so many of those people that have asked me if I would happen to know where their family's farm is. And I know, from this, that if they're located on Mouse Creek, the Hiwassee River, if they're on Sugar Creek, or if they're on Mill Creek. So I could at least get them in the neighborhood if they came to Bradley County. And so it's been a labor of love. She's about 90% done. And what did I have to do? I had to drop that and start working on Copper Hill because I've got to get it done before May. Right. But if anybody has pictures of Copper Hill, not of the miners in 1910, but of your family vacation in 1960 with the barren hills behind it, you need to call me when the show goes off, because I need a few more pictures like that to make it really what I want it to be. Tommy, 2 hours has just whirled by.
Well, I think there's still enough in her folder there. I think we could probably go another 2 hours without even taking a breath.
And turn the phones on. Yeah. But that's what Ron said. Where was it I was going, Laura? And I told Ron you was going to be there, and he decided he wasn't going.
Up to was it Joe's open house?
Yes,
okay.
Christmas. Joe had an open house of his beautiful 1800s house for invited guests, and my daughter and I had been invited, and I asked Ron if he'd like to go, and he said, well, I don't know. And I said, I'm so excited Laura's going to be there. He said, I might as well stay at home because I won't get a word in edgewise, because when we're together we're talking this fast and this long, and we really love each other a lot. And to be new friends, I think that's the amazing part of it, not having met each other till just probably
so
2 years ago.
Well, we'd love for you to come up to the Hiwassee. It's the Charleston Calhoun Hiwassee Historical Society meeting tomorrow at 3:00 at the Heritage Center in Charleston. Love for you to come up for the program or to meet you, and let us know if
you
there's
have some pictures or something you
right.
think Laura needs to see. Bring it, and it's going to be about Nancy Ward.
Right.
And so, if you're really interested in Cherokee history, and in particular Nancy Ward, be sure to come out. Thank you so much for tuning in. As we always say, be sure to document your history. Tommy, thank you for coming in today.
Not
and Morgan,
a problem.
nice to see you again. Thank you.
No problem. And, everybody, you see how much work that goes in with this. So do your next generations a favor. We've got these little cameras on our phones now that you can record really good video. Go ahead and document everything that you do with your family. When
Interview your relatives.
Yeah.
Please put names on those pictures. All right, Laura?
That's right. Yes.
We just sit and look at these pictures and say, who in the world are these people, and why are they sitting next to this creek, and just trying to figure it all out when somebody could have just simply written on the back, that it was a church picnic
Well,
and
you-
who the people were.
Right. You think about the number of times now that you ask a question and we'll say, "Oh, we should have asked so and so," and that person is gone. So the people that have an interest in the history, yes, these phones have recorders on them. Just go turn that on and talk with the people. Just ask them that just tell me about your life when you were little, and it'll just go from there.
Yeah.
You know?
So anyway,
Thank you again for tuning in.
Thank you, everybody.
See you next week
And
on Old Town Cleveland.
on Old Town Cleveland Saturday. But before that, Thursday night, we'll have some good sports for you. We'll talk some wrestling. We'll talk high school basketball. Bradley, like I said earlier, Bradley plays tonight, as does Cleveland Walker Valley. The winner of those two games will play Monday night. So we'll know who the region, who the district champion is on Thursday night. So listen in. We'll discuss that. Thanks again, everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Stay dynamic and magnificent.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Andy Figelstaller with Ed Jacobs and Associates. We are an employee benefit and insurance broker in business for the past 20 years. The new healthcare law